welcome to Gospel at a Glance. I'm Andy, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we come to the final verses of Matthew chapter 13. After telling parable after parable about seeds and soil, weeds and wheat and treasure and pearl and nets, Jesus pauses and asks a single question. It's not a trick question or a rhetorical question. Before he moves on, Jesus wants to know whether his listeners understand what they have heard and what kind of responsibility that understanding carries. So let's check out the scripture for today. This is Matthew 13:51 through 53, and this is from the ESV. Have you understood all these things? They said to him, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. And when Jesus had finished these parables, he went away from there. So let's jump into the reflections today. Jesus ends this long teaching section of Matthew with a question. Have you understood all these things? And it's not really about intellectual mastery. Throughout Matthew 13, Jesus has already explained that understanding of his teachings of God's kingdom is tied to a response. So to understand in Matthew's gospel means to perceive rightly and respond faithfully. The disciples answer yes, but that answer will be tested. But for now, Jesus accepts it, understanding that in this moment, there is a transition happening. Jesus immediately introduces a new image, and this is a scribe trained for the kingdom of heaven. Scribes were professional interpreters of Scripture. They preserved tradition, they explained the law, and Jesus doesn't discard that role, but he definitely redefines it. A kingdom-trained scribe is not someone who replaces the old with the new. They are someone who knows how to hold both together at the same time. Jesus describes this scribe as a householder who brings out of storage what is new and what is old. The old is not rejected. The new is not feared. Jesus is describing faithful interpretation, honoring Israel's scriptures while recognizing how God's reign is unfolding through him, through Jesus. Understanding the kingdom doesn't erase what came before, it reframes it. The brief exchange comes right after the parable of the net, and that's after judgment and accountability and all that talk of delayed sorting. And that placement here matters. Understanding is not neutral. Once a person has insight, they have a responsibility to follow through. So those who understand the kingdom are entrusted with it, not to control it, but to steward it faithfully. And the chapter ends very quietly. When Jesus has finished the parables, he went away from there. No summary, no explanation of the outcomes, or no real reassurance or conclusion. The teaching has been given. They claim to understand. And now comes that responsibility to live out those teachings and live out that responsibility. So what are the takeaways for today? Understanding Scripture is about response. The kingdom does not discard the old, but it reinterprets it. Faithful teachers learn how to hold continuity and newness together. And insight into God's work brings responsibility. Revelation, or revealing of God's kingdom, is followed by movement and response, not necessarily by comfort. Matthew 13 ends not with a spectacle, but with transition. Jesus has spoken, the listeners claim to understand, and then he moves on. The question that remains is not whether the parables were heard, but what people will do with them, whether or not they will be lived out. Thank you for listening to Gospel at a Glance. If you would like to catch us on all the social medias, you can find those links in the show notes, along with recommended reading, paraphrase of the episode, and a list of takeaways. Until next time, have a fantastic day.